Okay, this video on Wednesday, December the 2nd, 2015. Right, what I'm just going to do here, and it's a pretty important day as far as the UK is concerned, because I'll go to vote on another fucking illegal war, this time bombing Syria. And we've got to keep in mind here, folks, right, this is what we're going to understand. We're not talking about a full declaration of war on a sovereign state here, right? They're using the pretext of going after ISIS, right? Now, ISIS was created and funded, seeded and funded by the Western intelligence agencies like the CIA and MI6. Basically, it's just an offshoot of Al-Qaeda. I mean, you had others like Jabhat al-Nusra, and they're constantly coming up with new little gimmicks to keep the public in a state of alarm, right? This is what it's all about, folks. And basically, they're not going after ISIL or ISIS, whatever you want to call them, IIS. They actually want to get rid of Assad, right? Now, I've already shown in my presentation the full mile. In the second part, you would see, I believe it's in the second part, I might be wrong about that, maybe in the first part, but it's a General Wesley Clark, right? Top brass in the US military and the Pentagon, right, actually sitting in front of an audience, stating that just after 9/11 they came up with a plan to take out 7 countries in 5 years, right, starting with Iraq, going on to Libya, and then on to Syria, and so on, and ending up with Iraq.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." The truth is about the Middle East is, had there been no oil there, it would be like Africa. Nobody is threatening to intervene in Africa. The problem is the opposite. We keep asking for people to intervene and stop it. And there's no question that the presence of petroleum throughout the region has sparked great power involvement. Whether that was the specific motivation for the coup or not, I can't tell you, but there's always been this attitude that somehow we could intervene and use force in the region.
This is what we're seeing here, folks. It was all pre-planned. It was planned before 9/11. So all this crap about ISIS, right, going after ISIS in Iraq and Syria, especially Syria, right, is all smoke and mirrors, right? The reason being, as I said, they want to get rid of Assad. They've been on about that for long enough. They've been attacking him and funding the opposition rebels, right? And this is the Western governments we're talking about here, all funding the opposition rebels against, they did the same in Libya. In Libya, right, when they took out Gaddafi, those same opposition rebels ended up going to Syria, right? So this is what we understand here, folks. They're not even indigenous to those countries, right? They're just being moved on by the elites, by the Western intelligence agencies and governments. They're carrying on funding the same groups, whether it was Jabhat al-Nusra, all just different names, that's all, right? And they are fighting wars by proxy using those groups. That's what's happening. Now, I'm just going to cover a couple of stories here in the paper. You've seen all the propaganda going on for a long time about Syria and the so-called bombing raids that they're going to start. Cameron, total rat bastard, right? Total minion for the globalists. And we're talking about basically every single one of his cabinet are landed gentry, right? They've never served the interests of the British people. It doesn't matter which party you're talking about. They're all following the same agenda. It's just continuity of agenda. No matter which party gets in there, which fucking people would wake up and start asking real questions, right? And I mean, look at this, right? I'm just going to point out what it says in this shit sheet today, right? The Daily Mail. Before we go on to the Syrian crisis, right? Osborne banks on migration to boost economy, right? But Osborne banks on migration to boost economy. This is coming out of Theresa May's mouth. She's just another rat bastard, right? They're all pissing in the same pot. That's how they get there, folks. All the higher echelons, you know, I mean, most of them are occultists anyway, right? You only have to look at all the scandals coming out of Westminster now with the paedophilia and everything else, right? And all the corruption, it's rife, right? So don't doubt anything, right? This is all real. And what we've got here is basically what Theresa May is supposedly saying. George Osborne is encouraging mass migration to help him balance the country's books, right? Well, to me, that's a red herring. Because the real reason they're letting them in here, and it's the same all over the EU, is to create chaos, right? The whole of the Syrian crisis is engineered, as I said, General Wesley Clark on record, talking about how they would take out all these countries in 5 years, right? So, and they're still battling. It's only because Russia, all they've done is change the contingencies because Russia got involved as far as Assad's concerned. It's all part of the game. And so what you're seeing now is the mass migration, which again is part of the agenda. It's all been engineered to create chaos throughout Europe, right? And I already stated this a few weeks ago in the Sid Wood video, when I said this was going to happen. They were going to create chaos through mass migration and asylum, use the asylum laws to flood the European countries with migrants and so-called asylum seekers, and then you would have ISIS and other terror groups riding on the backs of those asylum seekers. And yet you've got Theresa May only the other week saying, oh, we're going to start strict vetting procedures in the UK for these asylum seekers. What? For them that are riding on the backs of fucking wagons through Dover? I very much doubt it, right? It's bullshit, right? They want to flood this country. Not just, yes, Osborne, right, is banking on migration. You've got to remember this was started in the Labour Party in 2004. That's on record, that they were just going to open the floodgates. And I've also already shown documents, articles, where the UN migration chief, right, actually sought to undermine, he's actually stated, got on the record, this was mainstream media, saying that we want to undermine the homogeneity of every European nation, including the UK. And that's exactly what they're doing. That is, it's a multi-pronged attack. Flood the country to drive the wage standards down, right? Create more job insecurity, right? This is what it's all about, folks. And at the same time, they want to create a climate of anxiety, a climate of terror. These are the terrorists. All this terrorism that's going on worldwide, whether it's the Paris attacks, 9/11, 7/7, are all state-sponsored, right? This isn't, you know what I mean, these so-called ideological fanatics, right, are being funded. It's on record. Nabil Naim, who was the former head of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, you can get his video on YouTube where he's stating that the Western intelligence agencies are actually funding all these groups to go in there and take out the so-called despots or dictators like Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi. In fact, Hillary Clinton supposedly went on this is a few years ago, maybe before the so-called Arab Spring, where she's supposed to have met behind closed doors with the Muslim Brotherhood. That's why they sort of like ended up on the back burner, because it backfired when they went into Egypt. Nadia Square, the military got involved and started arresting all the heads of NGOs, the non-government organisations, that go in there first to stir up the shit in all these different countries, to stir the people up, thinking that's all part of some kind of democratic movement, when it's not. It's to start the trouble in the first place, to sow the seeds of discord, right? So they go in there, and remember, like I said, Egypt, they arrested heads of the Muslim Brotherhood, and the heads of the NGOs chased the rest out of the country, right? And it backfired on them now. Now they've created new groups like Jabhat al-Nusra and ISIS. Again, and it's on. I'm going to show you the articles on screen where the military have been, the US military and Obama have actually been funding ISIS and dropping them weapons caches, and giving them Toyota pickups, right? Where do you think you get all this from? These don't just spring out of nowhere. These have got serious power, man, right? These have got serious weapons and money. Where do you think they're getting it all from, right? It's already been out. It's out in the wash now through Russia. Putin accusing Erdogan of Turkey, right, of shooting down the Russian bomber, because it was in retaliation, because Erdogan's son had an oil smuggling operation from Syria. So ISIS, who now control a lot of the oil flow in Syria, are selling the oil to Turkey, supposedly the Western, one of the Western allies, right? The Western government's allies, Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Qatar, they're all pissing in the same pot, right? This is what you got to understand, man. They're creating all the crises, right? And then, as I said, they're creating this mass exodus of so-called asylum seekers and migrants to overwhelm every nation in the EU and create total chaos, right? Now, I'm just going to point something out here, yeah, right? I'm going to move on. Right, like I said, that Osborne story, it could be just a red herring, but personally I think it's a multi-pronged attack, again, to create a climate of fear, of panic. Alan Johnson faces ridicule over claim that EU exit would raise terrorism risk. What a load of bollocks, right? We are a tiny island, right? We could create an island fortress overnight, right? We could use the TA as part of the contingency and move them down to the borders and block everyone coming in, every illegal immigrant, every asylum seeker, and basically, and I'm not against asylum. I'm saying if Theresa May was right and being honest about these so-called screening procedures, but she's only talking about the ones that are coming through and claiming asylum through the airports or the ports, right? She's not talking about the ones that are smuggling in on the backs of wagons, right? Then it would be plausible to allow these migrants in, or these asylum seekers, right, under those strict screening procedures, but that's not going to be the case, right? Alan Johnson faces ridicule over claim that EU exit would raise terrorism risk. Again, a load of bollocks. First it was, the economy will suffer, right? They've been saying that for years if we pull out the EU. Now they're saying it would raise terrorism risk. Well, it can't get any worse than it is, folks. Yeah? I mean, they're allowing them in anyway. They've opened the floodgates, right? And there's no prospect of them ever shutting it because of what Osborne's saying and Cameron. They've just allowed that to happen. It's again a continuative agenda. Labour started in 2004 and it's carried on since then, because that's exactly what they want to do: dilute the population and create a climate of fear, because then they're going to come in with the boots. We're tired of martial law. It's going to be an incremental thing, right? This is the guy here. Alan Johnson, the rat bastard, another rat traitor. The lesson from Paris is clear. To tackle terrorism, we must stand shoulder to shoulder with our allies in Europe. That doesn't mean to say we have to be part of Europe. We can still cooperate with those in Europe, right? But that's not what they're talking about. They use any crisis. In fact, it was Rahm Emanuel, right? One of Obama's minions, right? And Bush before him, right? Revolving door politics. Rahm Emanuel, who said never let a good crisis go to waste. And that's exactly what they do. They wait for these crises, or they engineer them in the first place, and then they come in with different solutions or new measures each time, you know. And this is just one of them. To tackle terrorism, you must stand shoulder to shoulder with our allies in Europe. And yet, John Mills, the millionaire, probably got his head screwed on. It's safer to take back control than to keep giving away powers. The public won't believe this scaremongering, and he's bang on. People are getting more cynical about this bullshit, right? They know what the game is. A large majority of them do now anyway. They're waking up big style, right? Now, I'm going to go on. I'm going to move on here just to cover a few more stories. Here's another one. Osborne plotting to ditch foreign students for migrant figures. Again, it's just massaging the figures. They've done it from day one, ever since stats was invented, man, right? They're constantly meddling with the numbers. It's all fraud. It's all total theatre. And the whole system is corrupt from top to bottom. Let's just cover another one. Ignore statins scare stories, says expert paid by drug firms. Well, there we gone. Statins. There's been a lot of stories about statins. In fact, it's not just stories. Statins are dangerous, right? Truly dangerous. First of all, they don't discriminate between good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, right? And basically, your brain is made of good cholesterol, right? You've got HDL and LDL cholesterol, and basically, statins don't discriminate. They destroy both. So if you're taking statins, your brain's made of cholesterol, right? It's not be long. Never mind the heart attacks, right? You'll just have no fucking brain left. It'll be eaten away. Dementia, Alzheimer's, or whatever you want to call it, right? But it will be caused by now they're saying ignore statin scare stories, says expert paid by drug firms. This is what they do. They put their cronies up. Their shills up front, like they did during the swine flu crisis, right? Liam Donaldson, Chief Medical Officer for the government, Chief Medical Advisor, on 155 grand, 75 grand a year from GlaxoSmithKline, telling everybody to take the swine flu vax, or the vaccines. That talk about conflict of interest, they're all corrupt, every single fucking one of them, right? PM, Corbyn's terror sympathisers. He urges Tories not to join Labour radicals over Syria. Doubts over his 70,000 allies claim before vote today. Now, what we're seeing here, there's no hiding place. Corbyn's threat to MPs who back war. What we're seeing is a total all-out attack, not just on Syria, but on Corbyn. Now, I don't know much about Corbyn, right? But I understand he had certain sympathies, certain sentiments about 9/11 and other false flag events, right? We're basically saying they were inside jobs, self-inflicted, and out to a point, I reserve judgment on the guy. But what I'm saying here is not him bullying and being bullied or intimidated, right? Bullying and intimidating these MPs. It's him that's been bullied and intimidated. He's shutting his mouth, right? Because he's against the bombing of a foreign national sovereignty, right? A sovereign state. That's what he's talking about. Again, the mainstream media, the shit sheets, twist it and distort it, right? He's not a sympathiser with ISIS. He's basically saying you can't go and attack a foreign state, right? A sovereign state without first declaring war. These guys aren't declaring war. They're a bunch of fucking criminal psychopaths. They're bombing shit out of how many countries now? Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, drone attacks, Yemen, right? Sudan, everywhere. It's our governments that are creating the fucking chaos, right? Not ISIS. ISIS, basically, again, ISIS, yes, they're a bunch of radicals. They're a bunch of extremists who behead, right? But who's saying anything about Saudi Arabia, who beheads somebody nearly every single day, right? Nobody's saying that, and yet it's Saudi Arabia, right, who are telling the EU through the United Nations to take more asylum seekers when they've never even taken one. Not one. Not one Syrian refugee have they taken. Saudi Arabia or their nearest neighbours, Qatar, right? Turkey's blackmailing the EU right now for billions of euros, right? And by the way, that's all part of the plan. Remember, Turkey, every single one of these leaders is like the fucking Sopranos, right? They're all sitting at the top there fighting over turf war. Meanwhile, we're being led like sheep into these illegal wars, right? And basically, that's literally what they're like. They're like a bunch of mafia at the top, mafia dons, sitting there preying on different countries or different... and basically it's all about resources and power, folks. That's what it's about. It's got nothing to do with freedom and democracy. These are creating the chaos. These are creating death and misery. They're a culture of death, right? And it ain't going to stop until we stand up and say enough's enough, man. They're not doing it in our name. Right? You've got to understand this, man. Corbyn, whatever you think of Corbyn, right? If he's against the war, right, I'm on his side. Simple as that. If he's against more bombing and more misery, fuck's sake, our leaders, right? First of all, we're the leading to edge of an abyss, right? Secondly, every single one of them are murdering fucking psychopaths. It's as simple as that. They didn't care about the people in Syria or Libya or Iraq or Afghanistan or Yemen or Sudan or anywhere else. They didn't give a shit about the people. It's about power. It's about creating a global atmosphere, a climate of fear and terror, right? So we will give up our rights. We will give up more and more of our freedoms, and at the end of the day, it's about consolidating more and more power not for the governments. They're just control mechanisms. It's for the banks, the central banking cartels and the corporations, and what they want at the end is a socialistic, based on the Chinese model, folks, a socialistic world government. All this is called crisis creation, right? The robbing were blind, they plunder the economies, and now they're starting wars to take a mind off that, right? And you watch, folks. This is basically we're sleepwalking into this. We need to start waking up. Why Cameron's army of 70,000 Syrian moderates to defeat ISIS is a deadly fantasy. You're telling me it is. I'll tell you why. Because most of them 70,000 so-called Syrian moderates aren't even Syrians, right? And they're not moderates. They're just an offshoot. Most Jabhat al-Nusra and other factions, they're no different. All they're doing, right, they're no different from ISIS. Basically, what you're talking about again, oh, look at this joke here. Well, he was David Cameron just before he stood up. Aye. Turned into Tony Blair. Aye, that's a good cartoon. Basically, folks, it's as I said, we are being dragged into another illegal war, lest we forget the fucking Iraq war and all the lambasting, right, the bullshit that we got off Tony Blair, the warmonger, and Bush, and yet we still haven't learnt a lesson. We still allow these fucking psychopaths, these sycophantic, nihilistic psychopaths, to take us into another bloody war, right, on the pretense of going after a fucking bunch of cowboys, ISIS basically, right? Again, they're not well trained, they're not highly organised, at least they weren't until the Western nations, the Western government started funding them, right? And this is what we're talking about, folks, right? Now, the real reason they want to go into Syria, right, is about the Nabucco pipeline, right? You can check it out on the net, right? They'll say now that they've decided they've backed off from finishing this Nabucco pipeline, right? Basically because of the stalemate in Syria at the moment, right? But that's just, all they've done is put it on the back burner. It's going ahead, and this is exactly the same as what happened in Afghanistan, folks, right? With they wanted UNICAL had a meeting prior to 9/11, so this was all planned to go into Afghanistan, and what we're talking about here is UNICAL wanted to build a pipeline across the Helmand province in Afghanistan. If you remember, that is where all the fighting is, Helmand province in Afghanistan. And so that's what it's all about in Afghanistan. It's about a gas pipeline coming from the Caspian Sea through the Helmand province, right? And that is one of the main reasons they're over there. Of course, there's also the tons of lithium that's in the Afghani mountains, right? Which is actually there's big contracts going through there with likes of Caterpillar, and Chinese are involved as well. So don't ever think again that it's about freedom or democracy. Look at this one here. Paris, no. London, for Met terror training. I don't know if you can see that there, right? Right, this has been plastered all over the papers, right, the past couple of days. And what we're seeing here, it's orchestrated, folks. All these fucking newspapers, the journalists involved here, the prostitutes, right, they are following an official line, an official narrative. This is theatre being played out, right? And actually what it says here, right, this bird, she's asking Assistant Commissioner, said such a scenario would present officers with a challenging set of circumstances. She said, we are asking our officers to do a different thing to what they did previously. It's about going towards the threat. They will have to walk over casualties and wait until it's safe for someone else to go and help them. Well, that can be argued about, right? At the end of the day, right? I guess these coppers, right? And believe me, folks, if you go on my presentation page, right, Presentation TV 100, or check it out on YouTube, you'll see a video called Mark Passio, right, by Mark Passio, called, I believe it's called The Cult of Evil, Order Followers, right? And basically what you're talking about here, the Order Followers are the military and the police, right? They're told to put aside any conscience, right? Any conscience, just to follow orders, right? And yet what you're seeing is going on around the world, folks, right? All the conflict, all the violence and the mayhem is caused exactly by all those order followers, whether it be the police and the military. Now, I didn't suppose I'm going to make fucking friends about this either, but as far as I'm concerned, and Mark Passio, right, we're both on the same wavelength here, right? Order followers, right? Not the order givers, right? It's the order follower who ends up with the biggest moral culpability, right? If you carry out actions which cause death, injury or harm, right, then basically you put aside your conscience to follow those orders, and you're at base consciousness. And I'd invite you to watch this video by Mark Passio. I'm sure it's called The Cult of Evil, right, and Order Followers, right? And you will get it up on YouTube and listen to him break it down what it's all about, folks, right? These guys are basically robotic, most of them, right? They don't use the right side of the brain at all, these lot, right? Total reptilian brain. And also I believe in one of these papers, it may be this paper here, the Daily Star, right? Daily Mirror, sorry. Armed officers will put themselves in the line of fire and ignore the injured if a Paris-style attack is launched in the UK, Scotland Yard have revealed. So this is just a public relations stunt, for public relations is propaganda. If you read about Edward Menzies, you realise that. Marksmen are being trained to hunt and eliminate any threat if terrorist gunmen launch an attack. The tactics mark a change from past techniques where shooters were isolated until negotiations could be opened, right? Now, I'm just going to point something out here, right? We've been asked not to give first aid to the wounded. The most important thing is for them to get to the threat. That's understandable, but what they've also, right, This is what she says here. This is a Miss Gallen, right? Miss Gallen, the Commissioner, Patricia Gallen. Again, it's all just PR, public relations, right? Basically saying she stressed that this is not a shoot-to-kill policy, right? Our primary concern is to save life, right? But then what the Daily Mirror is saying this, she would not be drawn on whether the army will be deployed on UK streets to stop terrorists, right? Now, I hope you understand what that's saying, folks, right? Nobody's mentioned the army yet, right? About the army being deployed on our streets, just like Belfast during the Troubles and all that, right? You better understand what this means, folks, right? Nobody's been prompted, basically, nobody's mentioned anything about the army, right? But now the media is slipping it in there. It's a leading question, right? It's a prompt, but it's for your benefit. It wasn't for hers. It wasn't for this Miss Gallen's, right? Basically, I'll read it again. It says, right, but she stressed that there is no shoot-to-kill policy. Our primary concern is to save life. She would not be drawn on whether the army would be deployed on UK streets to stop terrorists, right? She was meant to be prompted there, right? But what you've got to understand, folks, this is acclimatising you to what's coming, right? Martial law. It's all been done incrementally through stealth by creating this fear of this climate of fear and anxiety. This is the next step, folks. Arm the police first, right? And I've got a document there, basically an article stating that a couple of years ago the MOD ordered 60,000 battlefield weapons for the police. They knew this was coming, right? This is all engineered. 60,000 Canadian assault rifles with telescopic sights, silencers and grenade launchers. Well, who the fuck do you think they're for, eh? Most of these coppers aren't even trained to use them. They'll end up shooting themselves in the foot, right? But what I'm saying to you is this, they're gearing up. It's not for terrorism, it's for civil unrest, right? And it's for total control, a total clampdown, because the banks have been raping the arse off all the economies, the European, the US, all the Western economies for years and years now, and now they're bankrupting every single nation to bring it to their knees, right? And they're getting ready to come down with the boots, the military hardware, right? And they're using ISIS as a pretext to do that. This is what you got to understand, folks. It's all engineered, every single. I'm going to put articles on this video, right, just to prove what I'm saying, right? All this in the shit sheets, right? The corporate control media. Meantime, look, I'm going to point something else out here, look, right? On one of the biggest days, right, the most important days of this year, they're voting today on whether to bomb the shit out of Syria or not, right? Right? Assad, not ISIS. All those fucking poor people over there, right, who are still left there. They've been doing it in Yemen, Afghanistan, I've already said, bombing the shit out of men, women and kids, families, funerals, weddings, drone attacks, constant mayhem, chaos, torture, murder, created by the Western agencies, the Western governments, the Western military, right? And we're just basically banging that up, right? We're taking that up a notch now. Look at this. Today, Daily Mirror, our angel of hope, right? That's a tearjerker. And you know something, right? Excuse me for not being sentimental, right? At the end of the day, bless that kid. I'm very sorry for her, right? I'm very sorry for the family. But they're using that, you know, of all days, right? Of all days, right? They're having a vote on whether to take the UK, to drag the UK into another legal war, right? And they put this on the front page, right? They put that on the front page, and of course that other shit sheet there talking about this bitch in Celebrity fucking Get Me Out of Here, or whatever the fucking programme is, right? Talk about distraction, right? Now, this one here, and again, I feel for the family and I feel for the kid, right? It's a sad situation, but isn't it a funny time to put that on, right? When you consider, right, there's literally tens of thousands of kids worldwide if not millions, right, hundreds of thousands of kids worldwide starving to death every single day. And much more than that, countries like Yemen, the ones we've just been talking about, Syria and Afghanistan, there's kids being blown to bits by Western drones, right, every single day. Do we care about them kids? Do we cry about them? It's because it's not our kids. That's why. That's why we don't, right? That's the sad, and really it's a serious part about this, right? We don't care about families over there. We don't care about their kids, right? Because they're not our kids. They're a different colour, a different creed. They're thousands of miles away, right? But we'll shed a tear over that little girl there, bless her, right? Now, I'm talking about the hypocrisy behind all this, and it's the mainstream media that are pushing this. Again, it's part of the agenda, right? This is what you got to understand, man, right? I can show you pictures from Iraq, right? After the war on Iraq, the second Gulf War, right? When the troops, the US and UK troops were using depleted uranium, artillery shells and ammunition, right? Blasting towns and cities, right, all over Iraq, and then afterwards, you see in the aftermath, right? What you saw is massively deformed bursts all over Iraq, and I've got photos that will cut you up, they'll make you vomit, right? They don't even look human, right? But we didn't care about them. We're shielded from that, right? That's the sad fucking part, that we do not care about our fellow human beings and all those different countries. I've just had an argument with someone today. Well, they're doing it to us. Who's doing it to us? Not the fucking Syrians. The groups, the extremist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Jabhat al-Nusra and other offshoots, right? They're the ones, right, who are being funded by the Western intelligence agencies, by our governments, and armed, right? They're the ones that are supposedly doing it to us, right? Not the Syrian people, not the Afghanis, not the Iraqi people. They're just ordinary people that want to get on with their fucking lives, right? Cameron, Blair, Brown, all those rat bastards, including Obama over in the US, they're all fucking warmongers, right? Get it through your heads. They will carry on with this, the seeds of destruction, right? They belong to a culture of death. That's what they're all about, and they will carry on with this war in perpetuity, right? This is the so-called war on terror, on a word, right? Not on a country. One time you used to have a war, you would have two countries declare war on each other, right? And then there would be an outright victor and an outright loser, right? Now we have a war on an idea, a word, a war on terror, right? Well, that can go on forever, folks, and that's what they fucking want. You better wake up to that fact now.